Hey everyone, I'm Julie Gunlock. I'm with the Independent Women's Network, and I'm here today with Dr. Chloe Carmichael. She's actually one of the fellows at the Independent Women's Forum, and she just wrote an article over at Fox News. Go check it out there. Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and how to use it fearlessly. Love that. Thank you, Chloe. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Thanks, Julie. I'm really excited to be with you and super excited for this fellowship. It's been amazing in so many ways. Thanks.
Well, you write a lot about fellowship and about human interaction and how people do interact with one another. And look, we are living in a time of what seems like perpetual, I guess you would say, people being perpetually offended. And then as a result of that, people being nervous to say things, sort of self-editing. But now we actually have this new trend where people consider speech violence. How do you tell people or guide people to distinguish between emotional discomfort and psychological harms?
Yeah, I mean, and believe it or not, emotional discomfort can actually be healthy. There's something in psychology that we call distress tolerance. I mean, many people get that, say, getting out of your comfort zone is actually a good thing. But as you said, there's also almost like a victim economy where people can just get perpetually offended and then they say, well, words are violence. And so, therefore you have to be quiet. But to answer your question, an easy rule of thumb that I can help people to understand the difference, between, say, dialogue and like actual violence is that for me as a clinical psychologist, if a patient tells me that he's going to go shoot somebody, I am legally obligated to inform the authorities. If a patient tells me I'm going to go, give my neighbor a piece of my mind, I'm going to tell him that I don't like him and I think he's stupid, it would be illegal for me to violate that doctor-patient confidentiality and tell anybody. The difference is that one is actual violence and one, he may be planning to say some nasty things, but nobody's actually being physically harmed.
But people today don't make that distinction. I mean, I'm talking on the receiving end, right? When you have people on college campus and you see these sort of independent journalists go onto a college campus and ask very sort of innocuous questions, genuine curiosity. I mean, they might have a political position, but they are trying to act as a independent journalist who's really seeking out the truth. And I've seen these videos. These independent journalists approach people very politely, and they'll say something like, why do you feel this way? And it is very common now, especially on the left, of course, for people to say, I'm uncomfortable. I think what you've asked is violence. We've seen it in Congress where I think it was Josh Hawley asked a question of a witness and she responded that I feel like your question is violence. I think I'm remembering this correctly.
I saw that too. Yeah, we call that secondary gains is what I think we're tapping into there. So there's something called the secondary gains of victimhood. And that could come even like, say, the classic textbook example is a little girl breaks her leg, she's in a cast, she's suddenly missing out on gym class, everybody signs her cast, brings her stuff. There's a secondary gain to the point where even when her leg is healed, and this is the classic textbook example, it's in many Psych 101 textbooks, that then when the doctor goes to take off her cast, she says, no, 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 it's still broken. I'm sure of it, because she gets attached to the benefits, the secondary gains of that, victimhood. And so I do think that there's this weaponized bullying language. I think that goes to what you're saying. And to your point also, Julie, about the fact that it seems like there's a directionality issue, like between liberals towards conservatives as far as, crying victim. This is one of the things that I actually talk about in the Fox op-ed piece is something I call the 5Ds. And liberals are statistically more likely to do all of these things. They're forms of social hostility about political differences. So it's disinviting a speaker, defriending someone on Facebook, declining to date across the aisle, decreasing time with somebody, or dropping contact altogether. And I just want to say this with true compassion. Liberals are doing this, I believe, because they really have come to believe this harmful false narrative that words are violence. And we also are in an epidemic of loneliness. Liberals also report worse mental health. Out of compassion for liberals, I'm trying to help them understand that what they might be doing is boxing themselves into an emotional corner of loneliness that's not only not helping them, but it's also preventing them from having dialogue and making their case and maybe even persuading a few conservatives.
It sounds like this has already woven its way into your own therapy practice. And it sounds like you have very good coping mechanisms and ways for people to sort of escape that. How do they receive that guidance? Are they willing to do it, or do they push back, or do they say your words are violence?
Yeah, I've had all of the above. So in my book, can I say that why free speech matters and how to use it fearlessly? I actually provide, as you alluded to, techniques on how to speak up, but I also provide techniques on how to listen and hear things that you may not like, because both are really important, to free speech and to dialogue, and to not be lonely, to have true authentic conversations with people. And I also do believe that the elevated levels of anxiety and depression that we're having trace back in some level to this words are violence idea. Because, to your point, clients in my practice, I've talked to clients that I actually have a lot of empathy and compassion for. They're terrified that if they say the wrong thing to someone, it's akin to them running someone over with their car. I mean, what a frightful way to live your life. God forbid I say the wrong thing. And then, of course, they can also get very triggered and reactive if they hear the wrong thing. They feel as if someone has assaulted them. Now, I know it's frustrating for those of us who see that that's just simply not true, and we want to dissuade them of that. And it can be complicated if they have a secondary gains attachment to their
Right, right.
to this delusional belief. So I do the best I can, and to your point, I've heard all of the above. And that's why I just finally went and said, let me just write a book. And the book is designed to hopefully not offend liberals too much, because, like I said, I think that they're hurting themselves more than anybody else with this.
You hear often parents say, I sent my nice, sweet daughter off to campus and she came back this raging lunatic, unfurling the pro Palestinian flag or spouting off about inequities or ruining Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. What is the role of universities in this, in shaping this current sort of movement and this sensitivity that is we see, especially in young people?
Yeah, I unpack this in the book as well. And I'm actually in talks with Columbia University, my alma mater of all places,
Nice.
to give a talk about this issue, because they've had a lot of issues with free speech. And to your point, why is this happening at universities? I think part of the issue is, and I discuss this in the book too. It's a great gift, by the way, if anyone has a back to school gift for a college kid. But many of the college faculty departments, psychology included, have a ratio of about 20-1 Democrat to Republican. And again, there's nothing wrong with Democrats. There's nothing wrong with Republicans. I would like a diversity of thought. But when you have fields that have, say, a 20-1 ratio, most psych departments aren't even 20 people. So that means that you're likely, and this was the case in, I believe, every psych department where I've ever been, that there's basically a 100% Democrat liberal leaning. And so then there's an echo chamber, and there's something called groupthink, which I also unpack in the book. So then you have these, young, kind-hearted college students that just earnestly want to learn. They have a deferential attitude towards their professors, which to a certain degree makes sense, that they say, hey, if the textbook and what the prof is saying don't make sense to me, maybe it's me, maybe I need to learn, let me learn and adapt to what this, higher education is trying to teach me.
Right.
And then there's also the fact that they know if they don't sing the song that the professor wants to hear, it could hurt their grade.
Yeah.
Moreover, they're these days you can get sent into disciplinary action by the school if you say, well, hey, actually, I don't think men can become women, or maybe I think that why are we having a women's affinity group but not one for men, or whatever the case may be. So I think college kids are impressionable. They're somewhat deferential, and they're genuinely frightened of the consequences. And I think that is why, to your point, they go off to college in one mindset, and 6 months later they come back completely different. It's like they've been brainwashed.
You talk about how free speech and exercising your free speech is actually good for you, right? But I'm kind of curious. We all are, and even right now, we're talking about those people who believe that, speech is violence, and talking about, providing them coping mechanisms. And my God, it can't be easy to live that way. And there's sympathy for them and compassion for them because they cut off their families and they're lonely. And it's this big snowball effect. But what about the kids? University of Virginia, the president of the University of Virginia recently resigned because he wouldn't stop with the DEI programs, right? He took this really brave stand and quit his position. But they actually did a poll of UVA students who feel like they are constantly watching what they say. They don't feel like they can express themselves. They don't feel like they can go off sort of the reservation, if you will. What is
Uh-oh, Julie, that's not an allowed
I know,
expression anymore. Uh-oh, it's a free speech police moment.
exactly. I really do need to watch that. But I
It's
will
a
tell
safe
you
space.
that was like a definite F at the UVA. But I am curious also about the psychological effects on these kids. What is it like for them? I mean,
Totally.
will they be able to go into, for instance, employment
Yeah.
and be innovative and be thoughtful and share their real thoughts, or are they going to basically self-edit for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, there's a million kind of sequelae ripple effect issues. So, first of all, you're absolutely right. 65%, in fact, of students on college campuses, according to a Gallup and Knight poll, said that they did not feel like their campus supported free speech. And that was 2018. So, I'm sure things have only gotten worse.
Right.
Now, in the workplace, as you mentioned, like where does this go as these college students become professionals? Because the colleges, with their 20-to-1 faculty ratios, are gatekeeping who gets into these colleges. And then when they're there, the students get even more extreme. That means that, say, when you have big law or, top finance firms, they're recruiting from top schools, but that means they're pretty much only culling from this, group thinked pool of people. And so then the culture at these corporations gets even murkier. Now, I will say on the positive side, I've actually had several large corporations invite me to give a talk about the mental health benefits of free speech, as well as some techniques that they can, speak their mind and listen resiliently. I think they might be doing it in part as a CYA at this point to be like, look, we really do support free speech, but it's been amazing. The HR departments actually tell me afterwards that, like, literally one quote was, the office is a buzz. Everybody was so
Oh,
excited. I mean, it does feel good. Typically psychologists understand that repression, suppression, denial, these things are not good for our mental health. They're also not good for problem solving skills, by the way, which, corporations typically want, live wires, knowledge, bring your whole brain to work. So my hope and prayer is that maybe corporate America is waking up, that putting everybody in a teeny tiny mental straitjacket is not only not good for them, but it's also not good for the bottom line.
I'm just interested in, because you talk about in your op-ed this idea, this is sort of related, but people are even afraid of their own thoughts, right? And certainly there's this idea of, I don't want to say something in public, but they also start to doubt their own internal thoughts, which I think is also really damaging, because this is the kind of thing where I think even like women feeling like they're in danger, for instance, in a situation where I think political correctness has really affected that, where women might feel like, okay, I feel like an individual walking towards me on the street, I don't feel comfortable. These are these sort of fight or flight feelings that actually can be beneficial to women. And I think that over the years, women have been told, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, whether it's like a man in a woman's locker, or, they're even putting men in women's prisons, this idea, and women's shelters. And it's this idea that you need to sacrifice your own comfort to make sure this man is comfortable. I think that's just one example, but I do think that there is a real danger to being afraid of your own thoughts. And again, this can really affect people's safety. Is that something you explore at all?
100%. I mean, and in fact, I actually had this happen to me a little bit too. This was actually, I share this in the book too. It was kind of a last straw wake up call moment for me, because I enjoyed a lot of, big media attention, which was great for my practice and my business. I never said anything in the media that I thought was untrue, but I would also be careful to like not say certain angles that I knew the generally left-leaning media wouldn't really want to hear. And then the last straw for me came about masking your kids for long periods of time during COVID. And, to your point of even just, stamping out your own awareness, I never did mask my own son, but I got very uncomfortable. I literally had to move to Florida eventually because, years were going to be going by. And
Yeah.
so I wrote this article about the harms of masking children from a psychological perspective and developmental perspective. And to your point, I was second guessing myself so much that I shared the blog with a few colleagues to say, am I missing something here? Like, is there some obvious thing that I'm missing here? And they wrote back with the Twilight Zone answer. They said, no, this is all correct, but you should not share the blog because it could discourage people from masking their children, which was like super weird. So
Right.
I
Right.
published the blog and it was retweeted by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and Jack Posobiec and all these amazing people. And it was actually what prompted me eventually to write the book because I realized that I'd been holding back myself so much that my
Mhm.
own mental health and my cognitive awareness and everything else, I was stifling it. And by unlocking that one area, I was like, wait a minute, I have other thoughts. And then I started dialoguing with people and realized that, it's obvious as a psychologist when we say it aloud, but by talking things over with people, we develop our own cognitive process. We can even discard bad ideas. We, learn more from other people. There's, social bonding, there's networking, all these things that we miss out on when we stifle ourselves. So yeah, I just want to say you're absolutely right that people can start to even stamp out and second guess their own thoughts. And it even happened to me. That was actually what led me to write the
So
book.
interesting. And I do remember the intensity of going against the public health narrative on masking. In fact, I think that was how we first sort of noticed your writing, and we engaged with you, and you and I had talked on a podcast years ago about that issue. But it takes a certain level of bravery. It's really courageous to go against the grain, especially I will say, like, it's one thing, look, it's brave for any mom to say, look, I disagree with this, right? And stand up. But for someone in the medical community like you are, my goodness, I mean, that took a lot of guts because
Well,
there
thanks.
weren't
I
a lot
wish
of
I had done
people.
it sooner. I only wish I had done it sooner. And you're right, it takes bravery. I think that was why when it came to my child and children everywhere, that was the last straw for me.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was silent even about the trans issue for much longer than I should have been. But when it came to like actually masking little 2 and 3-year-olds, thank thank God finally something in me snapped and I
Well,
said,
it's so interesting that you say that on the trans issue. I think that, some women, it really has taken, like, actually being in a locker room with a male. And because the narrative on the left is it doesn't happen. And it
mhm.
absolutely happens. And
Mhm.
so, um, anyway, that really is interesting. And I think it's such an important part of this, of one of the really dangerous byproducts of being afraid of your own thoughts, being afraid to speak about these things. It really does, potentially put people into, particularly women. I want to pivot over sort of this last question to talk about MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Certainly, you are in the medical field. You're certainly interested in the subject. Now, I don't really want to talk about taking red dye out of, candy and making ice creams all the same color and, seed oil drama and all this. That's not sort of what I want to get at. But I want to talk about from sort of your perspective, what does MAHA mean? And from a mental health perspective and a free speech perspective, what is your take on MAHA?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm super excited about MAHA in terms as a clinical psychologist. Of course, my lens is about free speech, that we can make America healthy, by everybody coming out of the closet of cancel culture fears. And, when we express ourselves, that's how we can overcome the loneliness epidemic. So social support is an incredible boost for mental health. It's how we, regulate our emotions and navigate problems and buffer against stress. And I have some real concerns that we are degrading the quality of our social support by, pantomiming politically correct answers to people or insisting that other people, do that around us. So my connection to MAHA on a very personal and direct level as a clinical psychologist is to try to get people to open up about speech again and to understand it's perfectly okay to disagree. It's even healthy to disagree, but it's not dangerous to disagree.
Yeah. Listen, Dr. Carmichael, I've been calling you Chloe this whole time. I'm going to
That's
end by calling
fine.
you Dr. Carmichael. You are fantastic. All your writing is at IWF.org. What is wrong with me? But anywhere else that people can find your writing, your book,
Yeah.
give us some information on your
Yeah, the
personal.
easiest way is to go to freespeechtoday.com. I pointed it to my website because Dr. Chloe's too much of a mouthful. So freespeechtoday.com will take you to my website where you can get my book, follow me on social media, and other good stuff.
The other website everyone should go to is IWNetwork.com. You can become a free member. You can find a chapter, find people that want to talk about these things like Dr. Carmichael has laid out here and express yourself. It's really healthy to do, or start a chapter in your area. We're always hoping people do that. So Dr. Chloe, Dr. Carmichael, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you'll come back.
Anytime, Julie. Thanks again. Maha.
Yes. And thanks everyone for listening.